Hi, everyone. I'm Phoebe Sutherland. I'm development exec at BFI and worked across Scale with this wonderful team as part of the Short Form Animation Fund. So I'm joined by Hélène, who is a producer on the project, Joseph, the writer-director, Chris, another producer, and Jiří, another producer. This film had lots of producers. So firstly, Joseph, I just wonder if you'd like to introduce the film for those who might not have seen it yet.
Yeah, sure. I'm Joseph, the director, and Scale is a 15-minute rotoscoped animation. It's a adaptation of a Will Self novella, and it's about a writer who's also a morphine addict who has lost his family and has lost his sense of scale. And that's it.
Brilliant, thank you. And it was, fantastic to see the film yesterday with a really full reception, part of Critics Week. And I think, it would be really interesting to hear a bit more from you about the genesis of the story. Obviously, it's an adaptation, but sort of how you came to find the material and why it stayed with you and why you wanted to make it into a short-form animation piece.
Yeah, sure. Well, I first read the story probably when I was in my teens, because it was written in the 90s, and it always stuck with me because it had so many striking images in it, especially this one where the protagonist thinks his arms have become the motorway system of the UK, and that really struck me as a kind of very visual, visceral kind of image. But it wasn't really until I got into animation and found this drawn technique that I realized this story could really fit perfectly with this form of animation, because it's set in reality, but it's twisted, kind of altered reality, playing with perspective and scale and proportions. So it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago that I met Hélène at a festival in France, Clermont-Ferrand, and she was interested to know if I had any ideas for any shorts or new work, and this one occurred to me, so I pitched it, and it kind of took off from there.
And I suppose that leads me quite nicely into the sort of next question, which was, a bit more about the development journey and, how long that took and the processes that you went through in order to sort of get to the, film that we have today.
I mean, we probably don't have time for all of that. But, I mean, Hélène and I would often joke that it became a bit of a case study at some points, where this would be a really interesting project to look at from a sort of behind-the-scenes kind of point of view, because it was just, for a short, it was highly ambitious, and it just kind of took a life of its own, and in as far as, I mean, correct me if I get any of this wrong, but, we applied for funding, and, I was interested in a French producer because my work had gone down, well in France, and they, they treat adult animation with a lot of respect there, and it's a kind of commodity, so I thought, a French producer would kind of suit this sort of project. So, we worked very hard on the material and had lots of visual evidence and tests, and we'd been working on the script, so we kind of built up this whole dossier of kind of work, and the other funding fell into place afterwards, I suppose, is the simple version. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we'll get onto the funding a bit more in a minute, but I also think, the rotoscope is so beautiful, and as you said, really lends itself to the story. And am I right in thinking this was your first film, rotoscope film in colour, and you previously used black and white?
More or less, yeah. I'd done one with some sort of spot colours in it, but right. I was very much from a sort of monochrome background.
And so I guess, creatively speaking, your choice of colour for this film, can you tell us a bit about that and why you wanted to use colour?
Yeah, well, I think I was really convinced by Hélène to do it in colour, because I think, we just wanted this to be a real step up in terms of production for my previous work, and so we wanted there to be backgrounds, we wanted there to be elements of 3D animation, and Hélène convinced me to do it in colour, because I was I suppose I was a bit nervous about the palette and also just the time it would take. It would, you know, maybe double our production time just to colour it in and to also create the shadow for it, which is something I haven't done before. So, but I think once I started playing with some tests, I realised it was possible to, because I think also it's quite hard to colour. This is all digital, so although it's a drawn technique, it's drawn directly onto a computer, you know, using a Cintiq, using a tablet, and it's quite hard to maintain a kind of hand-drawn feel to it, especially when you start introducing colour. So I was a little bit nervous that colour would maybe make it feel a bit flat and a bit kind of a bit too glossy. But once we started testing, you know, with different grades and, you know, we had a huge scope with what we could do when we created a colour palette. So we ended up really enjoying and embracing that process, really.
And obviously, you know, animation is a huge part of the performance of the film. But I wondered if you could talk to us a little bit more about your casting decisions and, you know, how that all went.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, first thing to say is they often say that animators are kind of repressed actors and they like to put their own kind of personality, you know, through the animation, and I'm very much fall into that category. So me drawing over the top is kind of me putting my own performance onto the actor's performance. But it's of course vital that the actors are, you know, brilliant in their roles and can perform a good job, because that's the basis for the film. So I worked closely with a casting director called Lara, based in London, and we went through a lot of sort of different people about who, because really it focuses on one main guy, and she suggested a brilliant actor called Sam Spruill, and after looking at his work and seeing what he'd done, he seemed like the perfect kind of everyman, but also with this kind of sort of darkness behind him, and I felt that he could really carry the film. And he was also just a very lovely guy who just wanted to do it because of the work, not because of who I was or the budget or anything like that. He just really engaged with the script, and it was a tricky shoot. We shot it in November in a house during COVID, so we had to have all the windows and doors open. He spent a lot of time just in his underwear, so he was very cold, but you know, he took to all this really well, and then the rest of the cast sort of fell into place. I mean, the other interesting piece of casting was the two children who are my children. I thought this was a good way to get around child labour laws. No, I'm joking. We took that very seriously. But it was kind of important to me that they were in it, because I like to find a personal although this was an adaptation, I wanted it to be personal to me somehow. So part of it was the sort of connection with family and your children, and the sense of like possibility of losing your children and how that might feel. So they really, you know, it was quite strange and emotional to have them in it and to also draw over them afterwards, but they were great, and it worked out really well.
It's so lovely to see them on screen and their performances. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the production side of things. And you had quite an ambitious budget for this short film. And I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about, you know, how that all came together, and, you know, how the budget was serving Joseph's ambition for the film, and a bit more detail about the finance.
Well, as Joseph was telling, we began with a long period of development. So we first worked a lot before securing a development fund from CNC. And once we had it, we worked to refine the project again with consultants and all. And then we raised the money in France, which was practically like all the funds that we could get for such a project from France, because we knew that we had a very ambitious project, and that also we knew what was important is that Joseph needed to be very free in the creation process. And it was the first time that we would have a team of animators animating following his style, which was quite a big challenge, because Joseph had been animating drawing each frame in his previous films. So that was the first challenge. And as there was not a case of this before, we had to make various tests to know how to budget it. How many, what was the length that we would need? How many animators? If you make a mistake on this, then you can pay it really. So there was this phase of tests. We got Arte on board, the TV. We got other funds from the CNC, the production grant. Once we estimated the project was ready to send for the production grant, we got it, and we got also a special effects grant. And then I tried pretty much different regions more or less at the same time, so they all came in with wanted the project at the same time. So we drew kind of a map of the project so that we could split the work, which would mean that then the big challenge of this was having strong supervision so that all the teams would fit together. And then at the same time we applied to BFI, and it took some time to discuss, and at the a little bit, and and then meanwhile we applied in Czech Republic with Jiří, where they made all of the color and the shadow, and we applied in Belgium, and then we had to find a way to design that structure, because there were different possibilities then. The shoot could have been anywhere, roughly. The animation or the color or the 2D, the 3D could have been anywhere, because we had a split of territories. So we had to try and find the best organization possible, so that we had the best teams, so that it would click in time with the different fundings being confirmed not at the same time, and so that it would not be too heavy for Joseph. And Joseph was extremely patient also. And we made it. We had wonderful partners, so everybody worked really seamlessly together, and the structure really worked well. And the first important choice was to decide to shoot in London, and then we drew the whole scheme. But that was an important decision at one point.
And I think actually we've just got a trailer to show you, so you can kind of get a sense of the project, Joseph's animation style, and what we're talking about. So.
Some people lose their sense of perspective. I've lost my sense of scale.
Great to see. Glad you all got to see. I wanted to go back a bit and talk about the sort of split amongst all the different territories, because obviously there was a pandemic in the middle of this, film coming to its life. So can you tell us a bit about, the challenges you faced and how you overcame them during COVID?
Well, the first thing is that as we decided to shoot in London, because the Joseph's films were known for their Britishness, and we wanted the British cast, and we wanted to shoot in a typical British house. Even though the backgrounds would be redrawn, recreated and all, we thought that because we really found the technique for the backgrounds afterwards, thanks to these guys. We knew that if we had a basis for the background, it would help then to draw. So that was the first COVID choice, really, because in France at the time we had a special subsidy from our film fund. If there was someone ill from COVID, then the CNC would pay, would act as an insurance, which is also what you put in place. But at the time, we couldn't get it if we would have had this type of problem. So Chris organized all the shoot like masterfully, and we were so frightened when the COVID tests arrived. We didn't want to open them. It was like, so you want to add something?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, one of the main challenges was going to always be kind of how we make this film in a very internal space. So like you said, it was cold, it was December, and we had all the doors open and things. But I was very lucky, like Andrew, a co-producer of mine, we'd just done a film in October. So we kind of knew the protocol, and we kind of had things in place. We had big 2-meter sticks to make sure people were apart. And actually, to be honest, like all of the crew wanted to make it work. And I think by that time, most of our crew had already worked on a COVID production. So everyone was very respectful of the things we kind of had to put in place. It was scary. It was like, I think the last day of the shoot was kind of the 13th or 14th of December. So if anyone had got it, would have ruined 30 people's Christmases because we'd have had to self-isolate. So it was a pretty stressful kind of period of time, and having to kind of still allow the teams that kind of creative space, make sure that the DP could be in at the same time as like maybe the designers, and then Sam and Joseph being able to spend a bit of time. It all had to be really sort of smartly coordinated. So we made sure we brought on the same first AD that we'd worked with in October. So it would all be very fluid with her team as well.
Yeah, it was like there was a super tiny window of time, and right after there was lockdown. So like the organization that they did, we knew that we were taking a big financial risk, but we knew that we were in security also with a super team that had made already 3 COVID shootings. So.
And I guess managing a team remotely across different territories and like working with people in completely different places, how did that all go for you?
Joseph did the motivational speeches over Zoom, actually, to the animators. The animators in Lyon and Strasbourg, they would do meetings, and then he would take like, this is the shot you've done, congrats, it's great. And so they would still be happy and remain motivated. That was great.
Yeah, I think the sort of Zoom revolution kind of helped this project, because we were so spread out. It never would have been that practical for me to sort of go there and come back and move around so much. So yeah, it was all kind of done remotely. We had sort of big team meetings, and then I would also get shots sent to me, and I could make notes on them and then send them back. And we had this kind of quite fluid production process for it. So yeah, it really kind of worked. And I was worried that if I wasn't there, would they be able to adapt my style okay? But we worked really hard on that and made sure we got the right people, and it was fine, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how everyone's just managed to sort of make everything work, and during a pandemic. So it was great. It must have been a huge challenge initially to sort of figure all of that out, but it all came together and you pulled it off, which is fantastic. And you've recently secured distribution for Scale. So can you tell us a bit more about that and how you went about doing that? Distribution.
Oh, the distribution.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have distribution, sales company, Salut Morrissey, have picked up the film, and actually Francois is the reason I'm certainly on the project. Like, we've worked together before, and it was Francois who kind of put me in touch with Hélène, and then Hélène kind of shared the project with me. And I've always been a fan of Joseph's sort of work and the way his animation expresses emotions. And I think a lot of animation can kind of be wow for wow's sake, and it just looks cool. But everything kind of that Joseph has ever done in the past has always been full of expression. So yeah, I kind of really was happy to be on board the project. And then because Francois had kind of tracked it from that early stage and already had a relationship with him, with Hélène, he kind of, once he'd seen the film, he just fell in love with it. And he doesn't usually take animations, so we'll be working very closely with him so he knows his skills. And I've had films in animation festivals before, so we'll work together to kind of build a really smart, succinct kind of approach to the distribution.
And as I've said, it was amazing to see Scale here at Cannes. I was just wondering what's next for Scale on the festival circuit.
Every festival. No, it's actually we're going to Annecy, which is really exciting. It's for me it's the first time, so you know this very much, Annecy. We're going to Annecy. We're going to Vila do Conde, to Guanajuato, and we're just beginning to send, but the response is really positive. And as Chris said, François' company is really experienced, and they are a team of 7 people. They only take a slate of like 6 films per year, so they're gonna really work on the film, and we expect that it's gonna have a big career.
Fantastic. And I just wonder what's next for you all as a team. Joseph, you've got your next film in mind.
Well, well, I mean, the Scale was such a sort of intensive job where I kind of really sort of lost myself to it and really kind of became like the character obsessed with finishing this animation, just like he's obsessed with finishing this book. So it's now we're kind of emerging from that. We're talking about feature ideas, and I think because we've proved we can do this style of rotoscoping on this scale, that we could do a feature, and we could do a longer form animation now that we can branch it out. So yeah, we're just kind of exploring potential adaptations, original ideas, and really just at the development stage for the next thing. But we're kind of really buoyed by the fact that we're here and that it's getting a response both within animation and outside of the animation world. So it's really encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see a feature. And I think I can open it up, see if anyone's got any questions.
I'd quite like to ask Jiří what that work that you did was, essentially, to sort of finish the film in Czechoslovakia.
In Czech Republic, it's also, I was thinking about this COVID situation because I would wonder what it would have been if we don't have COVID, if Joseph was really kind of, we were forced him to run around all those countries, or because somehow it helped, because we were remote, but everybody was remote and everybody was at Zoom, and we were at Zoom also, so no problem with that actually. It's the same for Czech Republic, because we initially we worked with the studio that was based in Prague, but then for some production reasons we moved to a studio that was basically on the other side of Czech Republic, and it was actually no problem because it's remote for us. It's just 3.5 hour drive, but it's quite far, So it was no problem, and then they did wonderful job. It was the color and shadow, so we are kind of privileged to do this color for the first time in his career, and the shadow. And shadow, I must say, I'm not a specialist in animation because I usually do fiction and documentary films, and our cooperation with Hélène is based on co-producing fiction films of Olmor Merzu and which is the Slovenian filmmaker. We did already a fiction and a feature, a short, and then we are preparing another one. And this was my first time, basically, with such a profound animation project. So I'm learning. So I am trying to understand what the shadowing actually means, because it's not so easy to understand it. Maybe you can explain, because it's frame by frame, very repetitive work.
Yeah, I think the Czech team had one of the hardest jobs, because they had a level of creativity, but it wasn't quite like the animators in France who were doing the line work. The Czech animators had to really follow the line work and the live action shadow reference, so they had to keep it very steady so the line wasn't moving too much. And also, some shots had like 8 to 10 different layers of color on it, which is no small feat. So that can be very, although they all said they loved doing the color, because they said it was just like hypnotic. They'd just go click, 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 and kind of sort of breathe through it. But it's sort of, you have to concentrate because some of it can be tedious, repetitive work, and they would just, you know, after the first week or so, I had very little concerns, and I could leave them to it. So yeah, it was really a great discovery. Yeah.
And I must add also that we are the only country of the co-producers that we are experimenting with the film further, because everywhere it's called scale, but we are trying to call it in Czech language, so it's called mír, which means scales, but at the same time, like mír means peace. So it's playing with the words. It's like a series of pieces or something like this, you know, which to me is nice, playing with the words with reference of the drug addiction or something the protagonist is trying to find. And also what we will try now, what was the plan since the beginning, that we will try to do a voice-over in Czech language. So it's, because I see the film also as possibly educational, for example, for university students or for high school students. And I think that when you watch it and you have to read too much, you stop enjoying the animation and the beauty of the film. So maybe the possibility of hearing could enable you to be more immersed in the film. But we will just see. Now we are casting the voices. The film is finished, and we would like to premiere it soon in Czech Republic. So we will also experiment with that, with the supervision of Joseph, of course.
Any other questions?
Maybe I'm thinking, if I may, I would like to add, how is that Czech Republic becomes a part of this construction? I mean, I think it's thanks also to our tradition of animation, because it's very important. And there is one aspect I would like to talk about, is basically there's a very personal connection of Joseph to Czech animation scene, especially to Jan Švankmajer, maybe familiar with the name. And Jan Švankmajer was, I think, a strong influence for Joseph. So there was this profound reason where also Czech Film Fund, which I would like to thank for the support of the film, had an additional reason because we are kind of booming now with animation. It's quite successful, and it was always in every period of Czech filmmakers' history that we really brought something important to the animation world. And now it's another period of this, and so that's why this film is also very important for us, because it's the international connection and very, I mean, adding another layer or another phase to what we can bring in the animation world.
There's a sort of rich tradition of Eastern European sort of surrealist animation, often using stop frame and textural stuff. And although this isn't, you know, a stop frame or, you know, directly linked, it's very much, what kind of made me want to become an animator, you know. So it was really nice to sort of have this kind of co-production. It would be great to go as well.
I would like to add also that it's European co-production, so it's really very much a European film. And we were super lucky to have on board Jiří and also Jérémy and Christophe, who are here, and who made an enormous job on the backgrounds, because the backgrounds are really complicated. There are different techniques, 2D, 3D. 3D environments recreated on the basis of live action, on which 2D elements are mapped. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Are there any other questions from anybody?
Just quickly on the children in the film, are they going to get check for the roles they had in the film, or are you sending them money? Or?
Yeah, they were paid for it, and I think it's gone towards the after-school club fees. So
just checking, just to make sure.
Thanks for the question.
Great.
Well, if there are no more questions, I think we can wrap up. Thanks so much. It was really interesting to hear more about the process, and it was, again, so wonderful to see it. And congratulations for, you know, getting into Chris this week and being here. It was, lovely to talk with you all.
Thanks for having us.